to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst radio network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Please use DJ at ArtistFirst.com. And now here they are. It's the remarkable duo, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Remarkable.
All righty.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. We went from legendary to remarkable.
All right.
I think that's a downgrade.
No.
No? Okay. Well, I'm feeling relatively unmarkable. Demarkable?
Marked?
I'm tired, boss.
Yeah. It's been a long day.
It's been a long day. But I am Michael Lyons.
Yes. And I'm Margaret.
And we are going to do the show regardless. There's nothing you can do to stop us. So before we begin, I would like to just do a small shout out to a very nice person who sent us some fan mail. So shout out to Wes in Peoria. Mm-hmm. And thank you very much, Wes. Those were beautiful words.
Yes. Lovely. We appreciated them greatly.
Right. Imagine if we had more fans. we could
much.
Spend the whole hour.
You're too much.
Shout out to, I think Mom listens.
My mommy listens.
My mom listens to me. So anyway, but tonight we are going to talk a little bit about one of our other besties, Carl Jung. And for those of you who are familiar, Jung is perhaps credited as the founder of modern psychology, and he wrote some seminal treatises back in the day. He and our other bestie Sigmund had it out with each other a few times, but in the end, I think Jungian philosophy and Jungian techniques really have won the day. And though Freud is certainly one of the founding lights in modern psychology as well, I think Jung can really be credibly said to have been the true pioneer there.
Well, he was very much into the symbology and how the unconscious part of you speaks. So it is fun to be able to read and observe some of the drawings that he had done, as well as his writings. But do you want me to start with his quote?
Well, yes, and just to preface it, excuse me, you mentioned it already, but Jung was very much looking for ways to unlock what he called the unconscious mind, and that kind of dovetails very nicely with some of the other things we talk about. So we thought this would be a good sort of a way to kind of put a different spin on that. But yes, please do.
Yeah, creativity. Creativity was the last one. But when you understand that there are many things that must come together for the expression of your creative process. So this is Jung's quote. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Jung.
Carl Jung. And it's a very interesting sort of a twisted phrase, if you will, because making the unconscious conscious sort of, it's just, well, what does that mean exactly? But what Jung was referring to is that all of us, and we know this very well, and many of the other writings, especially of Thoreau, talk about how the unconscious behaviors, Thoreau talks about the pain body and many other ways, many other aspects of how the ego acts in an unconscious way. And what Tolle's word is, and I think Jung was also hinting at the same thing, is that the being, the conscious being, is wrapped up in many, many layers of sort of this unconscious behavior. And it's unconscious because you're unaware, and this is Jung as well. Where do these motivations come from? Where do all these, sort of things that beset me and that kind of interfere with my daily, what I think of as my daily life, as my daily routine?
Yeah.
This idea that somehow that unconscious forces, that these sort of things I can't control and don't really know the origin of, from some sort of deep well of unhappiness or whatever it might be, kind of come up and influence my day-to-day behavior. I don't want to say my conscious behavior, because oftentimes it is truly unconscious. You're not aware of why you're suddenly angry, or why you're suddenly afraid, or why you seem to not be able to assert yourself, or not be able to succeed in life, and all these sort of things. There's another good way of looking at this is that, and this is brought out in Jung's quote, is that people feel that their lives are somehow destined for failure, or that I never can find this, or I'm always losing that, or no matter what I do, I try and I try and I try, and I always end up in the same place with the same rotten folks and doing the same rotten things. And it seems like I'm fated.
Yeah.
It's like I'm fated to always be doing this same grinding, unfulfilling thing, and always being beset with all these other problems that seem to come back up again and again. And you can hear this litany. I'm sure you've heard it. You may have even experienced it yourself. You say, why am I going through this yet again?
Mm-hmm. Well, relationships are always a topic. It's like I'm having the same relationship again with a different person. And why does this happen?
And that's the word. I'm glad you said that, because I was going to say the big word that always is part of that is why.
Mm.
Because and the reason why do you use why is because you don't know. It's a sort of a mystery, and this is the whole idea of this unconscious, this sort of dark well of tropisms and desires and triggers and things that just sort of leap up out of the darkness and either scare you or make you angry or take you off in a direction such that you do the same. And this is also very important, Mark. You do the same set of sort of rote behaviors. When something triggers you, you go through the same 5 things, the same 5 horrible phrases come out of your mouth, the same destructive actions you go through. And they become pathologies, and they become toxic. But people are very mystified. Often, it seems as though no matter what I do, and this is the litany, I always end up doing these same horrible things to the people around me, or the same people around me do the same horrible things to me, and I can't get out of it. I can't get away.
Mm-hmm. It's becoming aware, first of all, that you're actually doing that. You're doing something that you don't understand what your own motivation is on why you do that. It just seems like it comes out of the blue, or the situation presents itself, and suddenly you are, as we said before, you're in the same relationship you had previously, but with a different person. It's the same pattern. Like, what, am I fated to have relationships like this? Am I fated only to always make this mistake? What can I do? That's usually the first question. Is you have to get sick and tired of the cycle reappearing and reappearing to begin to question, can I change something?
I mean, that's actually the second step, isn't it? I mean, the first step is you're going through these things, and the second step is you get tired of it, and you start to question why. why am I having to go through this? It seems like, so this is almost the beginning of awakening, is that you realize that you are going through the same things over and over again. But Jung says that's not enough. You haven't yet made the unconscious conscious. You're perhaps on the borderline, and you're starting to understand that yes, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. It's sort of akin to when an addict, whether it's an alcohol or drug or whatever it is, sort of hits the wall, and they realize that this spiral of addiction has brought them to a place where they have to make a decision now. Do I go on like this, and my life becomes, a mess, or even worse, could be ended, or do I finally stop, realize that this behavior, this downward spiral, has to stop? This is sort of the beginning of that, when you say to yourself, well, why am I always doing? As you suddenly have this sort of insight, this is the same relationship I've had 5 different times. Every time I can almost read the script from this point on. It's going to go this and this and this and this. Yeah, it's familiar, and it's, in some ways you say, well, I know what's going to happen, so it's sort of comforting, but it's also sickening. It's like I can't get out of it. It's a trap.
Right. And I think we mentioned this in the previous show about Thoreau's quote.
Yeah, just briefly. I brought that in because of that, yes.
Yeah, that most men lead lives of quiet desperation. And men, of course, is humankind, not just males. But it's because you are in this state of not knowing why you are making choices a certain way. And I think the first realization is that this is a choice. You can actually choose to participate in this again or not. And that's a hard moment to grasp, because it usually feels like half a second before you engage. And this has got to be decided before you engage. Usually, before to jump out of the well-worn pattern that you know can happen, you have to have enough energy internally to say, wait a minute. Wait a minute. It's just that wait a minute. It doesn't, it doesn't necessarily mean that you won't go through that cycle again. It just means that just to be aware that you're taking a step into that well-worn groove again, you have to have a lot of resolve within you to say, I see this. I'm going to look at this. And once you start that, then you can begin to investigate your motivation. Why am I doing this? I got triggered. Again, and if you get triggered, you're right in that well-worn groove, and you're not going to be able to come out of it until you hit the end of the pattern. So, realizing that you do that is the first step. We all do that, but most of us are not aware of how automatic it is. You just think, well, this is the way I am. That's usually the response that you hear. And you're like, well, you can choose a different way and not engage in the old and engage in something new. But that takes courage.
Well, I want to go back. The key word I thought you just said, I think you just said, was that you are actually choosing it. And I think a lot of folks in the beginning say, why is this happening to me? Without that sort of realization that it's happening because you are choosing it. And they would argue with you strongly, no, I'm being forced into this. There's no way out. This happens and this happens and I have to do that and then this is going to happen. And they have the whole structure. And a therapist like Jung or others, would say, okay, let's see. So you go through this whole thing over and over and over again, and you feel as though you have no choice, as though you're trapped in this. And this is, we mentioned it in the write-up a little bit, but this is sort of the cycle of experience, the Samsara. The Buddhists call it the sort of wheel that you're on. And the well-worn groove in the neural pathways, because this literally makes a groove in your physical being, in your mind, and in your physiological responses. People who are in the throes of this have, literal physiological pathways through their brain and through their body, through their through their nervous system, through their muscular system. They will get, somatic diseases, which are caused in essence by psychic stress.
Right.
Okay, all this seems like, there's no way out. And then, there are many schools of thought which say, well, you have to use drugs, or you have to use this, you have to use, various neurotransmitter modifiers and so on. I won't go into any brand names. But the point being is that a therapist would say, okay, well, let's break this down. Let's go at it step by step. Let's talk it through and see that in the very beginning of this process, you kind of walk yourself back, you start to observe yourself from the point of view of what is happening. This trigger comes up, and I actually have that moment, Margaret just mentioned it, where I literally decide that I'm going to enter the well-worn groove. And initially, it may seem as though it's, between two breaths. It's so quick.
Mm.
And the first thing that the Dalai Lama would have said, and also that Tolle would say, is that you have to become aware that you're becoming triggered.
Mm-hmm.
And then just in that moment, before you may not be able to stop yourself, but just take that much of your awareness and say, here I am again. Watch yourself going through all the steps. Don't try to stop it yet, because it's extremely powerful. It's like a well-oiled and tightly coiled spring. It's shooting through this pathway, one to the next, to the next, to the next, like a machine. But if you just give yourself that much separation to see the machine operating, see that it is a machine, that it really is like a little mechanism in your mind, that the pain body is like a bunch of levers, and you hit the first one and that hits the second one, or like dominoes, and they all kind of fall in the pattern, and then later on they set themselves back up again. It's a wonderful kind of reciprocal machine where it goes through all of its stuff and does all of its damage and then sets itself up like a big giant mousetrap again.
Mm-hmm.
And all you have to do is touch the trigger and off it goes again.
Right.
You start to just say to yourself, well, look, there's this giant mousetrap here. Maybe there's 100 of them, but there's one right here. And if I just put my foot one little second further, I'm going to hit the lever that starts the whole process going. It's all just on a hair trigger.
Mm-hmm. It really is hair trigger.
Hair trigger, and that's what pain body is. It's literally sitting there lurking. It is funny, but there it is, just lurking, waiting for that trigger, almost storing up a bunch of your energy that you could use for many other things. But don't even think about that. Just storing up a bunch of energy, a bunch of emotional energy, a bunch of psychic energy, keeping it all locked down and ready to go. And then somebody, some poor soul, touches the button, or you do, and off it goes. And the beginning of making that unconscious process, the unconscious pain body, the ego, which is kind of piled up in all the corners and ready to rock and roll at any moment. The first part of that process is just to look and say, there it is, lying in wait.
You're observing yourself.
Yes.
Observing your internal setup. And that is the beginning of making the unconscious conscious, because suddenly you begin to see what you were just responding to. And when you realize that, it's like, oh, okay. And then you get triggered. you go through it, but this time you actually see yourself go through it instead of just being completely immersed in it and being dragged along by the wave underwater, let's say. Your head's above water, but you're still being brought along. But you see how this is all unfolding. And after the reaction, that's usually the best time to be able to take stock of what it is that just happened and try to make decisions at that point. In other words, okay, I know I get triggered when this happens. I have to take a breath. See if you can take a breath before you wind up diving in. It's a bit by bit progression, baby steps until you get to the point where it's like, wait a minute, I've done this too many times before. I know the way this goes. I got the lesson. I finally got the lesson. That's enough of that.
Well, I love what you just said, though. This is, first of all, a good therapist will be able to tease this out, and using that mechanism to start to root down into the unconscious, having another pair of dispassionate eyes that you can trust to say, okay, wait a minute, just wait right there just for a moment. Let's just look at this carefully unpack it a bit, carefully realize that this is, here it is, kind of uncovering the little lever that's going to set off the landmine. Look, here's the lever right there. Don't step on it because it'll set it off. But before that, it was dark. And so you're bringing in some sort of a light here. You're bringing in the ability to uncover the sort of motives that are hidden. They've been hidden by someone. That someone was you. And they were built over many, many years, maybe from influences from other people, from traumas, past traumas experienced, from hurts or whatever. They were built, though, over a long period of time, reinforced, sometimes multiple times. Each time they're triggered or each time a similar situation comes up, they're reinforced. Mm-hmm. And when you start to try to untrap yourself, and by that I mean unbooby trap yourself, you need help. You need a little bit of assistance, because if you just root around in the dark, likely you're going to bump into something that's going to trigger it, or you're going to bump into something that scares you, or something that makes you angry, and that doesn't necessarily help. You end up finding some scary stuff and saying, well, I'm never going to go back in there again because it was too darn emotional. Too much of that stuff is right next to your heartbeat. You're hitting into things that perhaps you'd buried and remained hidden. We've talked, and Tolle has talked about this as well. We've talked about it as well, where fragments of yourself from long ago, or from past horrible experiences or past traumas or whatever, you leave them back there. You do that as a defense mechanism. This is part of the human psyche. When we're desperately injured or desperately traumatically stressed, you encapsulate those experiences. You can't feel them. You can't process them. There's too much there. But in doing that, you fragment yourself, and you leave a piece of emotional trauma, of an emotional machine, which has a lot of levers and sharp edges and a lot of energy back there.
Right.
If you just go back and bump into it, it can release a whole bunch of flood of pain. That's, Paulie calls it the pain body, because it's exactly what it is. It's like a physical copy of you with all of your power, with all of your smart and your intelligence and everything else, but it's not there except to keep itself alive as a parasite and to hold on to that pain. Mm-hmm. Diffusing that is, I won't say dangerous, but it's difficult, and it takes, Margaret just said, it takes courage, and it takes sort of a steady hand. You got to get back there and realize that has to come back into you. You have to forgive it. You have to accept it. You have to understand that that did happen. You have to diffuse its power to hurt while still accepting it. You can't, rejecting it actually makes it stronger. And rejecting the pain body and pushing it into the past gives it a place to live that it likes to stay in.
Mm-hmm.
And it grows little tendrils, which are the triggers, into your present life, and in essence takes it over. It sounds insidious. It is insidious. It's the complexities of the unconscious power of the human psyche. And this is how people get pretty messed up.
Well, the unconscious, I'm trying to remember the name of the epigeneticist who did this.
Oh, yeah.
Carol. Well, I will research and try to remember her name.
Yeah.
She had brought up the fact that the neural pathways are like trees within your brain. And when you have an unconscious thought pattern, it's like a tree that has no light to it. It's not bright. It's like a dead tree, just branches. But if your pattern is towards living, bringing the higher emotions in of creativity and joy, peace. It's more like a tree that's healthy with leaves. If you're depressed, that's when the tree just looks like a bunch of branches. And they're hidden. And the way her statement was, you have to bring that out into the light in order to deal with it and to change it. And it's changing your patterns of thought. Understanding why it is you do what you do. And when you understand it, you are actually shining your consciousness light on this dead tree pattern that doesn't produce life. And it's understanding that it's taking up real estate in your head. Maybe that's the best way to put it. You don't need to have these dead patterns in your head. And this is also referring back to what Jung was saying. These unconscious patterns that are motivating your choices, whether you realize it or not, need to be brought to light. And when they're brought to light, they're brought into your conscious self. And then you can begin to decide for yourself what you're going to do. Many times we need help with this. Some of the patterns are very deep. They may be generational patterns. It can go on and on.
Things that you've accepted from lives that you didn't even live.
It's true.
It's absolutely true.
It's true.
Cultural, these types of triggers can be inculcated into from cultural sources,
Yeah.
or from, there's sort of a family, that we call them the sort of these bloodline. What would you call them? The
generational curses.
Okay. But these sort of bloodline traumas, that come that here's a good one that if you say, well, my people, pick whomever they are, always hate these people because for 500 years we've been fighting amongst each other ourselves, and I know everything about that. That's a generational. That's a bloodline curse. This is something that you're bringing forward that you've never had the actual trauma. It may have happened hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, and yet it comes in and you're triggered. And when you see that particular, a member of that particular, tribe or whatever that you are sworn blood enemies of, you're suddenly raging and well, where'd all that come from?
Right.
It never ever happened to you.
Right.
Yet you have all your body is physiologically ready to maim and kill, you're physiologically ready to commit tremendous amounts of emotional resources and tremendous amounts of power towards fighting off this existential threat with really almost no actual motivation. They never hurt you, whoever this person is. Yet that doesn't matter. That's what we mean. You've brought all that forward, and you've created a pain body for a pain that you never experienced.
Right. Well, our people have always hated those people.
Exactly.
For generations. So you teach hatred.
Pass it along in the bloodline or pass it along in the cultural line.
Right. And it's jaw-dropping when you talk about it that way. It's like, how can you possibly do that? But
it happens all the time.
It's something that is common to humans.
Common. And you can see a lot of these things, okay, Margaret, and we just go into this for a little bit. A lot of these things are there because you can see that there are underpinnings, a survival instinct underpinnings below them. In fact, a lot of them are tied to things like fight and flight. Okay? Like actual triggers which are there to preserve the organism itself. And then you very easily kind of extrapolate those to the tribe or to the family or whatever. So they're there, and they're actually very powerful, important parts of your survival mechanism, but they're hijacked by these, let's call them higher level triggers that kind of latch on to these survival level triggers. The survival level triggers are literally right next to your heartbeat. When something gives you a tremendous amount of fear and trauma, that gets hooked into fight or flight.
Right.
But if that thing has all this sort of mental construct, that has hijacked this incredibly powerful fight or flight reflex, it gets triggered, and you are raging or fearful or running or whatever without even consciously being aware. You're already completely enraged or completely terrified, and the body's all ramped up to do it. The mind's all afire to do it. You're ready to go, ready to fly, ready to fight or ready to flee. And then what is it directed at? Oh, it's this object of my hate or this object of my fear, or both, usually combined in various parts. So the higher level function, which had no real base of power, it was just sort of a bunch of thoughts, a construct. Again, totally talks about the pain body as being a bunch of thoughts, constructs that hijack a bunch of emotional power and then tie it all to a trigger. That's the fuse or the lever that sets it all off. And it just erupts through your body. If you look at an fMRI of somebody who's in an emotional pain body reaction, it looks as though they're being beaten to death by clubs, because that's what they feel like they're being done to them. They literally feel as though they're being assaulted. Nothing physical is happening. Every physiological marker that says they're being assaulted is on fire.
Right, you mean
all the neurological pathways that say fight, flight, fear, every cortisol, every adrenal, every cortisol pathway, they're all firing. And if you're in the middle of that reaction, your heart's pounding, your blood pressure is elevated, your eyes are wide and staring, your muscles are tense. You're in a full reaction as though you're being physically assaulted by an existential threat. Nothing is happening. You're lying in your bed and getting tortured from a trigger.
Right. The body doesn't really know the difference.
Doesn't know.
Yeah, it will go into that pattern, and everything fires. And all the stress hormones are triggered.
Everything.
And it takes a while to come down off of that one.
Yes. And truly, these are the things which you absolutely need. Your body needs those things. If a saber-toothed tiger jumps out from behind a bush, you got to be ready in a fraction of a second to do flight, move, get out of the way, survive, do whatever needs to be done. Yeah. But when that same reaction is hijacked by seeing a red car behind a bush or whatever, you go through the same thing as though it was a saber-toothed tiger. And all of the damage, which is inconsequential when you're trying to save your life, but all the damage to your heart or to your arteries or all the stress hormones and everything that all the toxins which flush through your system as muscle breaks down and all the other things, all that happens to you.
Right.
And over again, and you end up getting sick. You end up getting, adrenal exhaustion. You end up getting migraine headaches. You end up getting stress and panic attacks. All that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's exactly when you're under stress for long periods of time. You have to recover from reactions like that, but sometimes you are in situations where it's constant stress.
Yep.
And you have to begin to train yourself to almost recategorize the levels of problems. Basically, you have car trouble. You can't get where you want to go. How strong a response is your body giving you?
Right.
Is it just like, oh, well, I'll just get a ride from here, or
I'll go another day, or whatever.
Right. Or, oh no, it can't be. My car is all.
Right.
I can't make it go.
Right. This always happens to me. Why is it always happening to me? Everyone's always out to get me.
Right. So when you begin to see that you actually choose the pattern that you are going to walk down, and your thoughts actually will be able to help direct that pathway. In other words, okay, the car is broken down. I can't do that. It's all right. I can do something else, or I can solve this problem.
Right.
And that's an interesting point, actually. This is one of the things that we always try to reinforce with the 4-year-olds. If they can't do a certain task or they can't solve a certain problem, you stop and you go, it's okay. Let's try again. You can do hard things. And this is a repeat of the voice that we are giving to the little ones so that they can pattern, okay, I can do hard things.
Right.
It's a tool that you can begin to grab a hold of and say, no, I can do something hard. Or, what was it? I remember hearing someone was struggling to loosen something open, and it was wrapped in all types of plastic. And just this lady muttered under her breath, "I will not be defeated by a piece of plastic."
Right.
And it's funny when you think of it, but it's exactly the mindset. Understanding that things are not always going to go your way.
Right.
And you will have to deal with things. But to begin to insert that thought in, I can overcome this. I will not be defeated by this. I can try again. I know I can do hard things. Just that underlying voice replaying in your head, going, no, I can try again. Or, okay, I'm going to need to take a break. I'll try again.
Right. Take a breather. Don't give up. I want to go back a little bit there, because that's exactly it. Is that the hypercritical voice that says, you never can do this right. You're always unable to do things. These voices are often part of the pain body, and the voice to combat that is exactly the one that you just talked about. You have to, in essence, accept where you are. Okay, the car broke down, or I can't get this open. I have to get this open. all those, the stress trigger comes in. I wanted to do this. The ego had an expectation. I wanted to do this. I wanted to go somewhere. The car's freaking out. And immediately you see it right in front of you. There's this big red trigger that says, this always happens to me, and I can never get to do what I want. And you stomp on that, and off you go. Instead, you just literally stop for a second and say, accept what is. Cars break down. Cars break down for anybody, all the time, anytime. You have to, once you accept that and say, this isn't something special that's being inflicted upon you by some demonic force. No, that's what the pain body wants you to accept, or to believe, rather. You accept that stuff happens. The universe is a random place often. This thing that just happened, you accept it, and the first breath you say is, yep, it happened. Here I am. The second breath is, can I do anything about it? Can I do hard things? Is there something that I can do to fix this?
Right.
If it's literally you say, no, there's nothing I can do to fix this, then Margaret's last sentiment, which was, well, then I can do something else. I have to accept where I am. One of the triggers of pain body is not accepting the present moment, is wanting it to be something completely different. And usually something where you aren't the one being afflicted, where someone else is, where someone else has to fix the problem that's happening to you because you're so important. The pain body is also a big drama queen. It wants to be very, very important.
Right. And frankly, it doesn't want to take responsibility.
No, it's always someone else's fault.
For what has happened. And one of the ways it does that, by the way, is to insert the phrase, I always do it wrong. Mm-hmm. So that means somebody else has got to do it for me. Right. It's you know, when you begin to see these patterns appear, it's like, oh, I always do it wrong. You know, someone's got to help me. It's the beginning of the victim mentality.
Yeah.
And to acknowledge that, no, you know, you actually can do something. You know, I can do something, or I can evaluate. In other words, I can take the moment, evaluate it, and see what else might be possible. And in the background, allowing the thought in is like, oh, I can try again, or there is a way, I just need to find it.
Right. Taking that breath, instead of stomping on the trigger and racing off what is happening, oh, this always happens to me, and why, the way of bringing consciousness into that unconscious situation, which the unconscious situation is the world just went sideways on you. You know, something happened that you didn't plan on. It's taken you out of your routine. It's given you a big problem that you didn't have 10 seconds ago.
Right.
And the first thing is the pain body screams, "Why me? It's always me. This always happens to me. Someone has to come out."
Yeah.
And you stop. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. Just the phrases. What you hear is, "You always do it wrong."
Right.
Until it becomes, "I always do it wrong."
Exactly. The pain body loves to grasp onto that.
Mm-hmm. And to understand that you don't need to accept that.
Right.
Which is difficult when you're a small child, but you, as an adult, you have to see it to undo it.
Yes.
Because there's, you know, the words that are spoken to you, especially words repeatedly, become subliminal or unconscious. And as a child, I think, they said it was the theta wave pattern that children are mostly in from ages 1 to 4 or 1 to 5. And that theta wave pattern is a record. You basically record everything that's going on in you, so that when you begin to go get older, 5 and up, you have already internalized, you recorded what was said to you, and then it just goes into playback. Yeah. So you almost have to parent yourself at that point and say, okay, I'm looking at my young me, and these words were the words that were said. I choose to replace those words. and this is going to be the pattern, the words that I'm going to repeat to myself whenever I'm engaging in a problem or conflict or something. I know a few people who do put those phrases in, somewhere on the wall or on the refrigerator or where they can see it and say, oh, okay, I can do hard things.
Yeah, and it's whatever works.
Mm-hmm.
But the mechanism, we've been going past this, but just in general, you and everyone else on the planet has acquired some level of pain body unconsciously. It just happens. It happens to everybody unless you're extremely lucky. So you have these things within you. They can be large or small. Once you get to the point where you realize that you are starting to see this pattern of behavior in yourself, it takes a little bit of introspection or therapy or both. Then what Margaret's saying is exactly what you need to do. You need to, this is directly from Ekman and Tolle and many others. You have to replace those things. The Dalai Lama, you have to replace that thing. I'm reminded of the little monk who was very afraid of a certain situation. And what he said was, the first thing he had to do was in essence welcome his fear. Say, oh, hello, fear. My old friend fear is back.
Mm.
What you've done is done two things with that. Whatever it is, whatever pain body is, if you identify it and you kind of freeze it and you say, oh, there's the pain body. There's my old friend fear. You've done to the pain body something it never wants to have done to it. You've cut it off from its direct access to you and put a doorway there. And then you can say, okay, I'm going to let you in. I recognize you. I'm keeping an eye on you. I'm not going to let you get out of hand. I know you're there. I'm not going to feed you.
Right.
I'm going to acknowledge you, which is a very big difference. Pain body, or these kinds of well-worn pathways, they gather your energy by being exercised. When they sneak in and start the merry-go-round spinning, they're grabbing a bunch of energy from you and getting you to put more in. The present moment is the energy source that they're looking to grab. They're in the past. They're all set up. But they need the present moment. They need your present physical energy to be fed into them, into their batteries, so they can charge up and store up and get ready to go again. Mm-hmm. So when the little monk says, oh, my old friend, fear, is here again. Fear is like, I didn't know you could see me. Yes. Sit over there, fear. Don't bother me right now. I know you're there. I can feel you. I can see you. You're right there.
It's acknowledging your fear, but not letting it take over.
Exactly.
So it goes back again to when people say, oh, I'm afraid. It means I am afraid. Instead of saying, I feel afraid. The identification is where the power comes from. And if you don't allow yourself to identify with fear, but you acknowledge that you feel fear, that is making the space for the emotion, but not letting it drive you. And that means it does not become an unconscious motivator. Fear being motivation is really important to you when fear is motivation.
And difficult, but once you get the clue, once you get the handle, and you can kind of see it coming, you have the ability. Again, it's something that is difficult to understand in the beginning, but you always have the choice. Your present moment is always within your choice to accept it and to do something. That has to be there because that's how the present moment occurs. It occurs through choice and through volition. But these bits of you, these unobserved, unconscious bits, these pain body bits, which can be, they're not just necessarily little, they can be huge. When you shine the light of your present consciousness on them, they stop. They have to stop because they can't operate in the conscious. They can only operate in the unconscious. once you shine the light of consciousness on them, they have to stop, and they have to be acknowledged. Yes, I see you. And then you get to tell them what to do, because the consciousness is the boss. The unconscious tries to hide from the consciousness and tries to, in essence, operate in the shadows and grab the levers and do things such that the consciousness isn't aware, and the body gets to just be exercised and gets all the pain and all the emotion and all the trauma and everything going, and keeping the consciousness out of it. Once you understand that if they can't grab a piece of consciousness energy and tuck it away and run, like cockroaches or parasites of any type, you shine a light on them, they got to stop, and then they skitter away like mad.
Right.
This power is what you claim back, and then you can go into the dark corners and look for the pain body and root it out little by little. But the initial stopping of the reaction is that breath. That, okay, I'm not going to go off into why. I'm not going to go off into how come, and can't someone else do this, and why is it happening to me, and all the reactions. You can never do this. It's always your fault. Da da da. All that there, you just put the light of consciousness into it and say, the present moment of now is kind of uncomfortable, but I have to accept that this is what's happening.
Oh, this is where I have to start.
This is where I am right here, right now. And then, yes, you see your old friend fear coming in, your old friend pain, a few other things start to try and creep in from the sides, and you say, no. In the present moment of now, we got to do this right now. I'm going to accept the moment. Can I do anything? Yeah, I can try this, try that. I can do hard things.
And I think I don't want to skip this one viewpoint, but it's understanding that free will is a big component of this. You must be able to look at something and say, okay, this is my choice. This is my will. I do not want to be run by fear. I understand it has a place, but I choose the pathway that I go down. And when you realize that unconscious motivation, you can look at it in terms of a will that is dead. It doesn't make a decision. There's no life to this will.
Interesting.
A dead will. And your whole life is to take steps into bringing that into life, your ability to choose. And usually it is, the first steps is being aware that you are being funneled into an unconscious choice.
And what you're doing, what you're doing with these 4-year-olds, with these young children, is so, it's such an important thing to give as early as possible the patterning of saying, when everyone will have the experience of something happens that you didn't want, something that you were planning on doing doesn't happen, something that you really loved falls and breaks, and that moment, that sudden instant of helplessness and fear and anger and all that, if the voices that you've been hearing are, oh, this always happens to you, and why are you so clumsy, and da-da-da-da-da-da, those will rush in and create their own little pain body and tuck away all that emotion and make sure that they get to do that again and again and again, like parasites. If instead you have the voices to say, oh, okay, well, sometimes these things happen. It's okay to feel sad. I feel sad. It's okay to feel angry. You give these 4-year-olds little, I'm in red zone or I'm in yellow zone, a way to externalize and say, I feel this right now. I feel blue. I feel sad. I feel red. I feel angry. I feel yellow or whatever. I feel sad.
Sick.
I feel sick. But the point is that it's like saying, oh, here's my old friend fear. Oh, here's my red zone friend anger. I feel anger. I have a space for anger. I know exactly where anger is. I've shined the light of my consciousness, even as a 4-year-old, and in such a young stage in their life. You've given them this tool to say, "Oh, I feel angry because this happened," but it happened.
Mm-hmm.
The acceptance of the moment of now is this happened. It's making me feel angry. It's not making me angry, and I am not anger. I am feeling sad. But it's still my consciousness. Why am I feeling sad? Because this happened, and I accepted it happened, and it's going to make me feel sad. But then I can do hard things. Second thing, I can decide to do it again, or try it again, or do it over. And having those tools, that wonderful kind of step progression, gets them so far.
Right. It's a good thing to be able to become aware of what's going on instead of constantly being in a reactive state, because that's basically what children do. The reaction is based on what they have seen,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we all do. Whenever there has been an incident that's really stressed us, we don't get what we want. We didn't get our way. It's not fair.
It's not fair.
Right. And so what do? You become aware of it and try again. And we have reached the end of our show.
It's not fair. Actually, with the light of consciousness, it's completely fair, and we will be back again.
Mm-hmm. So I'm Margaret.
And I'm Michael.
And thank you for listening.